But if there is a secret ingredient that probably should be kept a secret, it is.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about alcoholism and sex addiction. Yeah, I know, sex addiction. So stay tuned, like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone whom you think would benefit from seeing this content. Its purpose is to raise recovery, and without anything further, let's get into the video. Alrighty, so here we are in the recovery classroom. And don't worry, we're not going to stay here. We're going to move to another space here very shortly. But yeah, just to set the tone. Okay, class is in session. So you might be wondering what the heck, this is goofy. Well, it is. And because, we want to show you that recovery can be fun. You can have fun. You can create whatever you want to create. And yeah, it's just a really awesome way of living. So let's go to our other spot, Barry, before I introduce you. All right, so here we are, guys. So my name is Ray. Welcome to the Ray's Recovery podcast, and not Ray like my name, but raise the idea of recovery and recovery in individuals' lives. So that's the purpose of this show, and we hope that if you're out there struggling like we were for years, decades, however long it's been, months, doesn't matter, that you can get something out of this, because we're both individuals who have, I dare to say, to use the word overcome, but today we're not plagued with that that bondage and chains, and we live a life of freedom now, and we want to share our experience, strength, and help you guys, give you guys tools and resources, so that you, if you are struggling or know someone who is struggling, can also live a life free from the bondage of active addiction, or help somebody else to do. So without anything further, I would like to introduce our very special guest today, coming from the UK, an Irishman, I believe, from the UK. I don't know very, very well, so that was an assumption, but I know he's in the UK. I seen a post on Facebook that he was celebrating 10 years clean very recently, and as of the day this is being recorded, May 22nd, 2022. So I just reached out, made a comment, congratulations, man. Because when I see stuff like that, I always congratulate people. It's such an immense accomplishment, like if you're in it, it's an immense accomplishment. And so I always like to, congratulate people, give them the recognition for their achievements. It's a great achievement. And so anyway, we talked a little bit, and the energy was right, and he agreed to come on and share his story about his addictions, and this, it could get a little graphic, just and a disclaimer there, but we just want to be real. And maybe you can relate to that graphic realism, because addiction takes us to some really low places in our life, and some really bad, dangerous places too. So without anything further, I'd like to introduce Barry McCandless from the UK. And Barry, thank you so much for being here with us today, man. Really appreciate it. And so just tell us about the beginnings, what it was like, kind of some of the highlights of what you went through, the worst, and how you dealt with like that, what your process of getting out of that, and then we'll get into like where you're at today and what you're doing today. So the floor is yours.
Hey Ray, thank you so much for inviting me along as your guest speaker today. It really is a privilege to be here, and it has been lovely to meet you and to listen to some of your experiences. And it always is a privilege to be asked to communicate on something that so many people in the world suffer from. And I am from the UK, it's Scotland that I come from. So if you've ever saw the movie Braveheart, you will then know exactly where I come from. And yeah, my sobriety date is the 10th of May 2012. So I did recently celebrate 10 years continued sobriety through the grace of God and through the fellowships that are available now and through a 12-step recovery program and through my belief in a power greater than myself that really is the force behind all of these wonderful resources that we have available to us today. But if there is a secret ingredient that probably shouldn't be kept a secret, it is I've had to work very hard, Ray, for my recovery. I really have had to dig deep and take on board a whole new way of living that was necessary because it wasn't just the actual addictions themselves that had to be removed from my life. In actual fact, it's said in recovery that when you remove whatever the addiction is, you've only made the beginning. And in actual fact, to hold on to that sobriety, we have to live a different way. And long story short, Ray, for me, I've had to take on a spiritual way of living. And not to deter anyone who may think that is beyond them, it wasn't a religious way of living. Although I have no prejudice against organised religion, I have no issue whatsoever with however someone chooses to believe. But it was taking on board new principles and making them part of my day-to-day living. And I would say the main one, and one that anyone who's battling addiction will not be practicing this one, and it was honesty. And that was beyond me at one time. I could not be honest with myself, let alone anyone else. And so that is a whole new world that I had to step into. And it was challenging. It felt uncomfortable a lot of times, unnatural even, because the way I had been living, the personality traits that had become so normal to me were the very things that were keeping me attached to my addictions. So I guess what I'm saying, Ray, is that I don't believe recovery is possible without personal change.
Amen. And yeah, definitely. And, a few things came to mind. So, like, one, when you're in it, when you're in those active addictions, whatever kind they are, I know from my own experience, I wasn't really like thinking about the stuff you were talking about. So it's like for you, what was your mental state like? Like describe that mental state. You have a little bit, but what I guess what is the when did you become or they start to become aware, like, I guess you had a desire, right? You started with a desire, even though you were still in the active addictions, you had that desire. But in order to get to that desire, it took some pain and suffering, I'm sure. And so what did you start to do and how did you feel? Like you said, unnatural, like this isn't right, like it was the conditioning, it was the addiction. So how did you kind of walk us through that, like your thought process of being in it and not thinking about those things, and the transition into thinking about these things. What was that shift for you?
Yeah, you covered it yourself there, Ray. I've heard it spoken of, the gift of desperation. And so in the recovery movement, we call desperation a gift because it's only through despair that a person like myself who's in that malady of addiction, it's only in the despair that I have an opportunity to say, this cannot be right. This cannot continue. And so that's what happened to me. But unfortunately, it took a long time for me to get there. I would have moments of crisis throughout the years. But what would happen is once the crisis began to fade away, my ego would resurface, and all of a sudden I would minimize my problem. Or, which was really my MO, I would blame my problems on other things. And so that was one of the anchors that really kept me in addiction, was that I always had this way of blaming what was going on other things. And so there was never personal responsibility, ever. But yeah, it was something, and
the whole world's got to change, not me. Kind of attitude. It's everybody, everything. The whole world's against me. It's everything else and not me. Or the other one I had a lot too. On top of that was, man, if I could just put the drugs down, everything would be fine. And you kind of hit on that earlier about if you realize it was an inside job. Sorry. Go ahead. Go on.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the problem I had was when I wasn't using alcohol or sex, both were part of my story, alcoholism and sexual addiction. The sexual addiction came later, so at the moment I'll speak about alcoholism. The problem I had, Ray, was that when I took alcohol, the experience I had was so different from my everyday living, from my everyday emotions. And the way it would make me feel was so desirable that even when I had short periods of time without drinking, it would be the only thing I would want to do, because I wasn't able to generate the feelings within myself that alcohol gave me. And this is in hindsight. Now my understanding is that that was the root of my whole problem, was that I needed something outside of me to alter my mood. And in the beginning, it was excitement. It was the ability to socialize, to speak to the opposite sex. It was the experience of being free and not having this constant inner critic. But as the years went on, it became more of having to escape myself. So it became very intolerable being me. My own thoughts were harmful to myself. The feelings that I created on a daily basis were very, very negative. And
let me stop you right there, because that's a really important thing you just said. The feelings that you created, were like destroying you. I know personally in active addiction, I wasn't aware that I was creating those feelings myself, because like in the programs, anyone that's been like in they say, we were actually creating our own problems. And at first, you don't realize that if you can even admit that you're an addict, like that starting point for your journey. And yeah, so that we can have an episode on that. Just we are creating our own experience, and that means that's great because now we can do something to change it, because it's not the whole world. It's not my horrible girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife or parents or whoever, friends. It's me and my thinking, and I'm creating this based on my thoughts, which are causing my emotions, and I'm causing me to behave this way. So anyway, I just thought we need to drive that point in a bit.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it was those emotions that were forming my perceptions. So the ideas that I held about me personally were very toxic. I had a very negative self-image and almost constantly comparing myself to other people and almost constantly feeling like I was different, I was unique. My problems were more specialized and less understood. And so loneliness was a massive feature of my life. And we talk about addiction being progressive. So it wasn't just the acting out that was progressive. I became more lonely as the years went on. I became more angry. I became more confused. And of course, the worse I was feeling about myself, the more I wanted to go and get the ease and the comfort that I would get from alcohol. So it's a devastating experience to go through, because you spoke about awareness, Ray. The only awareness I had was that other people, other places, circumstances were the reason why my life wasn't going where I wanted it to go. And it didn't ever occur to me to sit down and to speak with someone and to describe them what my life was like, because I done what 99% of people do. I put on an act. I pretended that I was okay. I tried to fit in. I tried to keep my problems behind closed doors. And once again, that was to my own detriment, because all it done was increase the isolation, increase the secrecy, and increase the loneliness. And so by the time in 2012, when I had a degree of humility, in actual fact, it was probably humiliation at that time. But when I reached out and asked someone for help, my problems at that time were so complex that I couldn't actually see a way of breaking these cycles. I just didn't have any belief that this experience could happen. And that's why I'm always put myself first to do something like we're doing here today, because I want to inspire others. I want to arouse the belief in them that if I can do it, if you can do it, and we've had similar experiences to them, then it's possible for them too.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the whole point of the message, is like to give someone either in it struggling, or a family member or a spouse or friend, um, some hope that, like, hey, like, we're living proof, and there's more than one way to get clean. There's a couple ways to work very effectively, but yeah, I mean, that's the message. Is there's hope. And I wanted to touch on something, Barry, that you talked about a couple times, and specifically towards the beginning, about just the pain and stuff, but and the roots, like the system here in the U.S. and many other places is like, you get caught using heroin, for example, you get thrown in jail, and you cannot punish the pain out of people. And it is a public health issue, not a justice. It's not so much a justice system issue, like corporal punishment type thing. It's a public health and safety issue, and we just start to look at it that way. And but so back to the point is the root, because I've had my own journey with discovering that root, because you can't punish the pain. The happy people, in my opinion, like truly happy, fulfilled, in line with spirits, people don't have a need or a desire to use substances because they already feel so good. And it's like, I love the feeling I have naturally so much that I don't want to change that. And so the flip side of that, like the law of polarity, everything has its opposite. It says that I am in pain, but there's a root, and it's not, for many of us, it starts in our childhood, and maybe it's been like in our adult years. We can't even think about it. It took a lot of digging for me to get to the actual core moment where it started the behavioral pattern and the pain. There was a couple of little things there. So what was that for you? I'm sure you figured that out, by now. So, what's that about?
Yeah, fantastic question, Ray. I'm so glad you asked. Well, throughout the years, I have been very committed to understanding myself and was completely unsatisfied with the idea that I carried for some years that addiction is driven by self-centeredness. And whilst I 100% subscribe to that reasoning, that happened in my life. Yes, I was very self-centered, ignorant to it, but very self-centered. But underneath that, as my journey went on and as I became more and more inquisitive about what actually happened, because some of my behaviours needed explanation to myself, I was shocked when I reflected back that I could behave in such outrageous ways. And it led me personally, now this may not be for everyone, but this was where I found the freedom. I discovered a man called John Bradshaw, who had done a series of programs on toxic shame. And toxic shame being, in his description, was the inherent idea that I am flawed. And to be very clear on this, what he was saying was, he's not saying I have flaws, he was saying I am a flaw. And it was that complete rejection of myself that was the root of my suffering. So in layman's terms, Ray, I did not like me. And my belief system was very corrupt. I had lots of disturbing beliefs about myself. And there was a complete lack of love for me. And I often share this when I'm working with others one-to-one. I'm fortunate that over the 10 years, I've always had newcomers come to me and give me the privilege of taking them through the program that worked for me. And I often say to them that if you had a luxurious car, or perhaps you were a gardener, or you had something that you truly treasured, you would cultivate it, you would protect it, you would look after it, you would make that a real priority to you because you love it. And the opposite happens with addiction. The addict does not have love for themselves. That's why they can continuously harm themselves. If you had self-love at any point in your addiction, you would say, I'm not going to do this to me anymore. And okay, you may still need lots of help and support, but you would drive that at the very early stages of addiction. The problem with, I'm going to say this, the problem with all addicts is that they don't have self-love.
And that's deep, yeah. And me personally, I have about right 7.5 years. I think actually in like 3 days, 7.5, maybe 7 months, something like that. But even still, I'm still working on self love, and I've come a long way, brother. But I still am not where I want to be, but I've come a long way. I respect myself. I wouldn't allow people to talk to me like they did back then. So yeah, it's come a long way, but there's still things I know. And self-awareness, just awareness in general, especially self-awareness, is everything. Is everything, because you can't do a dang thing about any issue if you're not aware that you even have an issue. And for the longest time, personally, years, I wouldn't even accept that I was an addict, because I said, no, in my life, if I can just put the drugs down, everything would be fine. And so I didn't really think I had a problem. There were so many concepts. It just took me so long. And I've been in institution treatment centers with guys in their 60s, and they still don't believe they're not. They've had this problem their whole life. They've been in 100 rehabs. It's like it's so yeah, it's just crazy. But so well, when did you start to love yourself? It's a slow process, just like addiction. We didn't become addicted in one day. The path of recovery is a slow process. We don't become fully recovered or cured in one day. Some people would say never. You're never cured. But so and talk about that and what you do, like how do you love yourself, what does that mean to you, what are some things maybe you do daily, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think I have had the good fortune, bad fortune of that belief system being so ingrained and so prevalent that it demanded my attention. I could not find another door to go through. It was like, Barry, you have to face this. And as I said, it took me on the path of looking at shame and looking at that experience of rejecting my own self. And it was torment. It was a spiritual torment. I was really destroying myself. I heard someone call it death by installments. And that's pretty much what my life was like from the inside. The freedom I got, Ray, was when I looked back over my childhood. And again, full disclosure here, this might not be everyone's experience. Not everyone might relate to what I'm going to share here, but you said right at the beginning about truth telling, and that's how I live my life. I like to share my truth. If it resonates with someone, great. If not, I'm okay with that too. When I saw little me, and I saw a little boy who loved to play football, soccer, who loved to climb trees and play with his friends, and a child who was spontaneous, who loved to laugh, who had a great sense of humour. Most of those traits and addiction were lost, I have to say. But when I looked back and saw little me, there was obviously something had happened to that little boy who would go on to act out the way he did in adulthood. And it was looking over that and bearing witness to the environment that I was brought up in. looking at the people who were my caregivers, looking at the areas that they fell short in. And so for a lot of addicts, they are brought up in homes where there is addiction. That was the case for me. And sometimes these addictions are not visible. So I know we may touch on it, but sex addiction can be in the family home and no one knows it. Not even the addict himself or herself knows that addiction is there, because the nature of addiction is to keep them secret. No one needs to know. The addict themselves is trying to stop it from being looked at. We try to push it away from our very selves. So there was addiction in the home, but of course, because there was addiction in the home, there was self-centeredness in the home. There was huge emotions in the home. There was a lack of security. There was a lack of unconditional love. Not that they didn't love me unconditionally, they did. And I'm so grateful to my parents today. We have a great relationship, but they didn't demonstrate unconditional love. They themselves were preoccupied with their own addiction and high levels of stress and self-centered behaviors and huge emotions and secrets. And I must pay attention here with secrets, because those secrets are in the family home, and even the children experience the moods from those secrets. And so that was what I recognised, Ray. I was able to see how my belief system was shaped. I was able to see that there was lots of things that I needed that I didn't get. One of the most crucial things that a child needs to get is information. A child needs to be informed. They need to have those talks, those long talks, those occasions where the parents pass on information to them. And if the parents are distracted by their own addictions, their own self-centeredness, then you're not going to get those experiences. Something like touch is so important to a child. To have your head stroked, to have your shoulder touched, to have those hugs. And these things were missing in my childhood. So I don't wish to say I'm not responsible for my addictions. I take full responsibility. But the origins of those addictions came in the family home through my belief systems, essentially about myself, and they manifested later on in addictions. So you asked me, how do I love myself? That's how I do it, through that compassion, that the beginning, the stage was set early on, and I didn't do that. So that allowed me personally to make freedom something that I deserved.
Nice. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for that. You said a lot there, Barry. That's pretty deep. I'm sure a lot of our audience can really resonate with that, because I know I can. My parents weren't addicts, but a lot of what you said, I seen in them. Like when I was 12, for example, they split up. Not to make this all about me, but they split up, and that was the event that kind of pulled the rug out of all the morals and values and beliefs they had instilled in me, which were good, godly principles and morals. And they really wanted the best for me. I was blessed to have good parents. They did the best with what they knew and got. And so, but once that separation happened, and it was just like a nightmare. And there was some other things in there. I'm just like these. I have a friend in Germany who wrote this book, The the parent-child contract, and it's about these contracts we have with our parents when they raise us. Like we have to do this, we have to go to this school, we have to be a doctor, or whatever that is, or we have to take care of the parents in these ways, and we should always pay for all their bills. And some people do it, and that's fine. And that's not the thing. But sometimes the way it's like enforced is like, parents are God, and so there's a lot. Everybody has a different, their own unique situation, but that does shape us, and there's nothing we can do about that as a child. It's not our fault, and so, but as an adult, it is our responsibility now to take that and change it and become the person or persons that we want to be, or always wanted to be, or and supposed to be, or created to be. I believe we were created. So yeah, very, so if you, let's say like your top 3 or 4, if you could just a list of 3 or 4, even 5, up to 5 things that you do daily, or at your best approach to do daily, because we're not perfect. I don't do all my daily stuff every single day, but that like self-love, things you do for your recovery, service to others. Like, what are a few of those points for you, if you could just list them?
Yeah, the greatest principle that I took on board was to be selfless. And so it was a very disruptive pattern in my addictions of everything was about me. And even though I would have at one time disagreed that I was self-centered, by the time 2012 came and I was ready to live differently, it was very evident that I was extremely self-centered. And so that is my number one priority on a daily basis, is to be selfless as much as I possibly can. And it's simple things, Ray, like making my wife a cup of tea in the morning, spending a little bit of time with one of my boys who wants me to look at something on the computer that I have zero interest in, but
Right.
giving them that 5 minutes and engaging them, listening to them. Doing this is an act of selflessness for me. I could easily avoid doing these kind of things. I could avoid other parts of service that I do in my life. But I realise that being selfless is essential to my own recovery, because it is giving it away that you keep it. The more love I give, the more kindness I give, the more generosity I give, these very things come back into my life and I experience them through emotion. So it feels good to be me, living that way. So I would say that is one of my top priorities. Of course, I do prayer and meditation. Those things I enjoy very much. I feel very connected to the universe through prayer. And then I do some writing. I enjoy that. I enjoy looking over my day when it's finished. And yeah, I think those are the main things that I do on a day-to-day basis. And they work, they are very, very effective, although it takes persistence. It takes, I think it's almost back to front, because you have to practice these disciplines without really knowing the rewards, or even having a disbelief that they could be rewarding. And it's as you practice them, the more you practice them, you begin to experience the rewards. And it's that cycle, really, Ray. So I'm now absolutely convinced in this way of living. I don't have any doubt that living by spiritual principles, tolerance, patience, forgiveness, empathy, love, generosity, that putting these things into action, not only does it keep me sober, but it gives me a very good way of living.
and then you view yourself better ultimately, and that encompasses and adds to that self-love, and it's just instead of the vicious cycle, it's the complete opposite. It's the loving growth, creative cycle of abundance and prosperity. Yeah, so that's, man, kudos to you, Barry. You're very well articulated. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this video, for sure. So I want to dive a little deep into one more detail before talking about like the present and some of the things that you're doing besides your like daily recovery stuff. So because I know there's a lot out there that struggle not just with drugs and alcohol, but sex addictions too. So personally, I can say I have a little, some of that here and there in ways in my life, but never like a full blown, sleeping with hundreds of people, can't stop, or, nothing like that. So tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure audience, some of them are probably having problems, struggle with that as well. So talk to them a little bit about that. What's that like? How the heck did you start? I mean, you kind of gave us a lot already, but yeah, just elaborate on that part.
Yeah, I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to share this particular part of my experience, because like all addictions, it's so misunderstood. If you think that the average addict is completely ignorant to their own addiction, how could someone who's not an addict possibly understand that addiction? You and I both know, Ray, from being in recovery, it takes a lot of introspection. It takes a lot of long hours, long conversations. It takes a real passion for the truth to understand their addiction.
Yes.
And there's lots of people in recovery who are doing well, living sober, but they still don't have a comprehensive understanding of their own addiction, but they have enough understanding to remain sober. The problem with sex addiction is that it is so secretive, it is not accepted in society, it is completely rejected. And if there's any addiction in the world that the addict wants to keep secret more than any other, it's sexual addiction. And that's because of the shame attached to it. The shame being you don't have control of yourself. And no one wants to admit that they don't have control of themselves. And so I was living as a sexual addict and had no idea. I didn't have a clue. And I knew I had a high sex drive. I would have confessed to that, but I did not know I was sexually addicted. And here's one of the problems, Ray. People believe that sexual addiction is someone who sleeps with multiple partners. And that is only one tiny aspect of sexual addiction. Would you believe that a person can be sexually addicted but never have had a partner in their life for 10 years, 20 years? I know someone who hasn't been intimate with a woman for 16 years, but he is battling sexual addiction every single day, because the amount of behaviours that come under the umbrella of sexual addiction is very exhaustive. So it can be self-sex. I hate the word masturbation, so I'm going to replace it with self-sex. Self-sex is a very crippling addiction. I know a person who I was helping who was doing that up to 9 times per day. This guy, excuse me, was struggling to be in his workplace because there were very attractive females there. that he would have to go into the bathroom to pleasure himself. The the intensity was so much that he would go into the bathroom and relieve himself, sometimes 2-3 times per time. So that's just one area. Someone who drives at night to stop certain places to observe females, a peeping Tom, you may want to call it.
Mm.
That in itself can be addictive. Pornography, prostitution, the list goes on and on and on. And one of the things that really prevent people from acknowledging that there's something going on is that we can justify these things so effortlessly. And these behaviours usually are not on display. An alcoholic will find it very difficult not to be seen drunk. A drug addict will find it very difficult not to be seen under the influence of drugs. But with sexual addiction, you can be in the comfort of your own home. You could even have your wife or husband in bed sleeping and be acting out your sexual addiction on a computer, on chat rooms, on pornography, with multiple partners. And so it was understanding that these behaviours, when you group them together, were unmanageable and were part of a bigger picture. So I'll finish by saying this, Ray. Sex and gratification for me was a way to get high. It wasn't just to experience the physical pleasure. It was a way for me to get high.
Yeah, so it's just like one was saying, like whether you have a gambling addiction, sex addiction, alcohol, drug addiction, and there's probably an infinite amount of things you can be addicted to. The problems that it causes in your life are very much the same. But the good news is that the solution to those problems is the same. So how you do one thing is you do all things. And that's something I don't think I hear enough or heard people say enough. Is how you do one thing, you do all things. And we don't want to get these things confused is kind of the point there. And for anyone, maybe you're listening to this, you have a family member or a significant other, someone you care about, and it's like I get that into it too. The family aspect. It's like why don't just stop? This is like ruining your life and us and everything. And just stop. And you're gonna lose your kids. You've lost your job. You're gonna lose your house. You've lost it. And the list is endless. And it's like we lose all these things. And I don't even like to really say lose. We willingly give that stuff away because we have free will. Sometimes that feels taken from us in these active addictions, like our free will is gone. But we've still done it. We've still given away. I mean, personally, I had everything a guy could ever want. Sports cars, nice computers and stereos and clothes and just everything I would ever want or need. And guitars, instruments, nice stuff. I gave it all away for whatever I could get for just to get the next hit. And then we're giving away parts of our spirit when we do that. And there's very big consequences with that. I know, because so we're becoming less and less spiritually aligned, less and less spiritual. I've suffered literal spiritual deaths twice, 2 spiritual deaths, complete desolation of soul and character. that's just a very bad place to be, man. And then so when we're in that spiritual weak state, we are attacked by dark things. And I've talked to many addicts, and me myself, I've had demonic attacks. I've been visited nightly by entities that were not good, not benevolent. Yeah, all kinds of like physical attacks and visits and I see things, I hear things in my head that I couldn't stop. Voices at night trying to mimic my mother, calling me to do stuff, like all kinds of crazy stuff, man. And that's what we do because we're spiritually weak. And so yeah, that kind of leads us into the kind of last bit I wanted to just kind of talk about is how it's like now for you, spiritually, and also what you are doing now. I believe you coach other people, and so yeah, talk about just like your spirituality a little bit, if you don't mind, and how that is important for your recovery. You've touched on it, but and then what you actually do, for a living and to help people.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I I love my life now. I'm very excited about my future. I'm very content about my present. I I fell in love all over again with my children in recovery. I as I went through the work I spoke about earlier and realised the influence that our caregivers have on us, I cherished the responsibility that I have with my own children. And so they are the bright spot in my life. They are my why. They are the greatest gift that sobriety has given me. I'm very grateful to God, as I understand, for the privilege of raising 6 children and to be able to pass on good information to them, to be a role model for them, to inspire them. And it really is a privilege. I cherish my recovery. I love my relationship with my higher power. And I really have a passion for people. And this really is the law of polarity here, because at one extreme in my life, it was all about me. Now, at the opposite end of that, I find myself in a world where I want to provide service to others. I want to be useful. I want to be helpful. I want to be someone that other people can look at and say, he's living a certain way, but look at his story. Look at where he came from. Because that was really a key part of my own recovery, was being introduced to a man who was living a real, honest, authentic life. And he shared with me where he had came from. And I was shocked that a person could transform their life to such an extent. And so those are the things I'm passionate about now. I am a life coach. And so that's took root in the past few years. I work professionally with mental health too. And yeah, I just have big goals, big dreams, big hopes. And I know that all of these things are and will happen in my life so long as I stay close to the universe. And my approach to life is done in a way that doesn't just serve me, but it serves everyone else who is involved.
Win-win relationships, yeah, instead of like all about me. Yeah, man, that's the law of polarity. If you guys never heard the law of polarity, he just explained it so beautifully. I mean, wow, it's the polar opposite, man. And that's so we're either living in the dark or living in the light. Whether you believe in God, Jesus, Buddha. I mean, we all know there's a good, a dark, and a light. So the dark side has its consequences. They both have their consequences, but man, the light is just so much better, and it's for everyone. We can all do this. This is available to us all. And man, in man's history, a long time ago, we did not have tools and resources or knowledge or help that we do today. So we're living in very fortunate times. The best time in the history of man to get clean is today. And it's so possible. One day I'll tell you guys my story. It's crazy too. It's been similar, varies in ways. With the processes and stuff. But so one other thing, Barry, I want to say. So if you're accepting new clients and stuff, or is there somewhere that people can reach out to you? Can we put some show notes in with how to contact you for your coaching, or I don't know, maybe your professional service, however that works, like your organization, anything like that, any kind of tool or resource or a good book that you recommend? We can put links below. You have something like that, Barry?
Yeah, anyone can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram. Just type my name in, Barry McCandless, maybe put in Scotland, and you get the right one. I do have a page on Facebook to get more from life. So that's what I call my coaching practice, because I believe that is at the heart of what everyone wants. Everyone just wants to get more from life. And yeah, so you can find me on there. In terms of a good book, there are so many. There are so many. I mean, you described really nicely there, Ray, how this is the best time to get sober, because the resources, the technology, the ability to hear the right information is right at our fingertips now. The book that I would recommend would be As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. It's a very short book, but very, very powerful, because it describes how our life isn't happening from the outside in. It's happening from the inside out. And that is what you want to get to as an addict. You want to have the realization that you are using the outside world to change how you are inside. And in order to get sober, that has to be smashed. And there has to be an embracement of the journey now begins by looking within. That's where recovery must happen.
Anything we want to see change on the outside first, must change on the inside. Yeah. We know we weren't taught that way. We were taught the opposite. Like the outside controls the inside. And so, wow, I hope that you guys watching this today got a lot out of it. I really hope that you can resonate with Barry's story and just the show in general. Again, we're here to support, to give tools and resources to raise recovery in your life, the lives of your loved ones, anyone who struggles with any addiction. And yeah, I just want to say, Barry, thank you, man. You're very well articulated again, and you give us a lot to think about. And just really great, a lot of gratitude for you doing this, because it's not easy. I know going through it, I would have never told a soul, like you were saying, isolation and stuff, but it's through the process of becoming okay with ourselves and starting to love ourselves that these chains have lost their hold, and we can now freely speak about them. And that ugly thing, the God I know can take the ugly and turn it into something beautiful. We can help other people, and that's the beauty of it. And that's the power that all of you have watching this too, is to take whatever ugly situation you had or have in your life and then turn it into something beautiful to help and serve them. Now that's what we're about. So thank you so much, my friend, for doing this today. And again, we'll have some things in the description below, some links for you. We'll put the As a Man Thinketh book and how to contact Barry. And yeah, thanks for tuning in today to Ray's Recovery, and see you next time.